You're listening to The Pivot Point, where we unpack the defining moments that shift careers and lives. I'm your host, Laura Dionisio, founder of Lead Intact, and my mission is to spotlight the raw, real stories behind career pivots, the fears, the hopes, the messy middles, and the bold decisions that follow. If you're feeling stuck or quietly wondering what's next, I hope these stories help you see yourself a little more clearly and inspire you to start moving toward your own dream life. Let's begin. Welcome, Debra, to the Pivot Point podcast. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm delighted to be here, and all is well.
I love it. We were just chatting before we hit record. Listeners, you're in for a treat. I had to pause, Debra, because I'm like, no. We have to record this because already you are giving some gems that I think everyone who's listening right now could really learn from, not just from me. But before we get started, I'm going to read Debra's very impressive bio. Debra Osofsky is a deeply experienced negotiator and contract expert, a formidable attorney, and a highly engaging trainer. With more than 35 years of experience, Debra negotiates on behalf of clients and advises clients how to improve their skills to effectively prepare for negotiations, negotiate great deals, and draft clear contract language. Debra has been running her own consultancy for 15 years, offering clients expert negotiating assistance. She leads negotiating teams of all sizes and composition in structured and unstructured scenarios, and also engages as an advocate in one-on-one negotiations. At times, Debra assists clients as a negotiation whisperer. I love that. We're going to talk about that. Helping them in challenging circumstances to refine their negotiating strategy, create and respond to proposals, and reach successful agreements, all while remaining invisible and allowing the client to take public credit. Love that too. Debra regularly teaches in Cornell University's public programs and in virtual and on-site professional education programs independently and through Marcus Evans, including Fundamentals of Negotiation, Bargaining, and Agreement Writing. Debra received an undergraduate degree from Cornell University and a Juris Doctor from Harvard Law School. She's really smart. Years of experience as a litigator as well as a negotiator allow her to utilize adversarial and collaborative modes of problem solving, whichever is appropriate to the circumstances, and to help others to strengthen their ability to do the same. Wow. That's amazing. And you know what? I am I'll tell you the things that really stood out to me. Negotiation whisperer. I would like to know more about that. And I love how you said, allow her to utilize adversarial and collaborative modes of problem solving. So let's talk about that. What is a negotiation whisperer?
Yes.
And what do you mean by adversarial and collaborative?
So it's important for me to make it clear for people. In negotiations, you either have a collaborative negotiation or competitive negotiation. Some negotiations are a mix of competitive and collaborative, but the competitive is kind of a very aggressive negotiation where for me to win, you must lose, right? And that I must beat you and try to get every last penny out of you, every last bit of value from you. That's a competitive or adversarial or traditional negotiation. That's on one side. On the other side are collaborative negotiations. In a collaborative negotiation, we might call it interest-based negotiation or problem-solving negotiation, where the goal of the negotiation is to try to find solutions where I definitely get what I want, or as close to what I want as I can, or as much as I can get. But also, I'm perfectly happy for you to get something. And in fact, we might try to solve my problems and your problems, and both of us be successful. And to try to find ways even that the collaboration can allow us to both be successful, sometimes redistributing between us what one of us cares more about and the other cares less about. And so sometimes collaborative negotiations make perfect sense. Sometimes competitive negotiations make perfect sense. And a lot of what I spend my time working with people on is what kind of negotiation are you in, whether you should be collaborative or competitive, or at what portion or what pieces of a negotiation should you be collaborative or competitive. If you create a huge amount of value between two people, if you and I start something together and we create lots of value, we still have to divide the profits, the value that comes out of it. So we tend to go back and forth, even in a collaborative negotiation. Sometimes you go to competitive, and being sensitive to when should you be doing one or the other. And I spend a lot of time training people on this one-on-one and teaching this in classes. And so, yes, I spent years as a litigator, which is about as adversarial as you get. So if somebody needs me to come in and help them beat the heck out of the other person, I will do that. But my personal goal is, whenever it is available, let us try to be collaborative, because collaborative negotiations tend to create much more value. People tend to be much more satisfied with the outcomes, and people tend to, when they get to a contract or a deal, they tend to follow or obey the deal. They tend to, rather than trying to unravel it or undercut the other side. So collaborative negotiations also have the value of being sustainable, that people who feel like they've been collaborated with and feel that they got value from the deal are much more likely to actually complete the deal as promised in the original negotiation. And so that's my preference. But if the other side doesn't want to be collaborative, we can be adversarial if we need to. And so that's a lot of what I do in much more detail.
Okay.
So should I go on to negotiation whisper? You want to hear about that, or more about collaborative and competitive? What's good for you?
You know what? I'm already getting this sense. I'm starting to understand why you're the negotiation whisperer, because just the way you describe, like, I don't know much about negotiation other than negotiating my salary, perhaps. But like, so I never think about like in business or in contracts. I am curious. I'm assuming somebody started calling you the negotiation whisperer. Is that right?
Right. I had somebody who started calling me asked me to be a negotiation whisperer. There's a dog whisperer.
Right.
So I think it's just that concept. So yes. So I started doing negotiation whispering actually in kind of a fascinating scenario. An multinational corporation wanted to take an action within the US in a labor context. And the local US portions of this corporation were saying, we cannot, this will destroy our company, what the multinational corporation wants to do. And I was invited into a room. I felt like I was working with the CIA. Walk in, all cell phones have to be dropped. I can take no notes. They would give me no materials. It was all projected on a screen. I could take no notes. And it was pretty intense because it was a confidential issue. And a corporation needed to know, was a major move that they were planning to make. How dangerous was it on the, kind of on a scale, how dangerous? And to the extent that I considered it dangerous, what were the dangers? And so that happened. And then it started happening more, where people would invite me in, sometime in these very clandestine manner of, you can come and give us advice and we'll all pretend we never saw each other before. And other instances where, on a much more ordinary basis, I'll work with people in an employment situation or at a not-for-profit or in a corporation where they're in negotiations and they're stuck and they don't know why. And so I will debrief with them, learn what's going on, make recommendations, and help. And that's, help people to be successful. And nobody will ever know that there was an external person, me, helping them figure out how to solve the problem. I don't need glory. I'm delighted to help people get to better contracts, to get to better outcomes, and I don't need my face ever to be seen. And so as a result, if someone wants me to come and stand in the front and be the negotiator, to be seen in the room, to be seen on the Zoom, absolutely can do, will do. But often people are uncomfortable or embarrassed. They don't understand why they haven't been successful in a negotiation, or they simply don't know where to start. Even on contract, their employment negotiations, they don't understand why they're not doing as well as they think they should be. And then helping people to understand how to be successful in negotiations. And I help them prepare so that they can go and do the work and then be successful. So I negotiation whisper at some fairly sophisticated levels, and then some, fairly ordinary. But either way, I don't need glory. I love to help solve the problem and make people more effective, including someone who's trying to be really collaborative and the other side is being competitive against them. They keep on losing. If you are collaborative and I am competitive, I will eat your lunch. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we have to go against our personalities. A collaborative person has to be competitive, or a competitive person would be better off being collaborative, and that's how they'll come out with a better outcome. And often people don't know because there's no one to tell them, you might not be matching your negotiation style to the actual negotiation issue in front of you. And so I whisper.
I love
And if I
this.
need to, whisper. And when we need to, we whisper there. And if I need to in other contexts, not whisper, then I can also get loud. But I find it much more effective to speak reasonably with people if I can.
Yeah, I love this, Deborah. And you know what's fascinating to me is when you started explaining how the negotiation whisperer phrase came about, it sounded like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't always have your own consultancy agency. You said like it's just started happening. You started getting invited to these types of meetings and it seems like it started as word of mouth. So can you walk us through what were you doing before? How did you realize like, oh, I can actually be a niche in this negotiation things? And then how did it go from there to then starting your own thing?
Right. So it's a great question. I worked as a private law firm attorney. I went to law school. I took the bar. I practiced as an attorney in a private law firm doing business negotiations, real estate, a lot of real estate transactions. I had a small portion of my work was airlines. I did some commercial airline work, aircraft work, and then uh, I switched to Airline Pilots Association, and I ended up working with the Airline Pilots Association for 10 years. And I did a lot of collective bargaining kind of negotiations, labor and employment negotiations, worked at ran faculty union at University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. I then went to a job that was a very impressive job, I think similar to the one I hear from you and I see in your materials that a lot of the people that you work with are people who get to a job and say, I have the job I always dreamed of. So I was the director of news and broadcast for the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, which is now SAG-AFTRA. I had a job that if you had told me 15 years earlier, what would you like? What would you choose? I'd say, I want that one. And so I was in a job that I thought was really fabulous. And it was really great in a lot of ways. I was able to be relevant for news broadcasters and all of radio DJs. I had a very big portfolio. It was very exciting work. I had wonderful colleagues. I loved the mission of AFTRA. There was a lot that was really great about it. And I felt like I had no control over my work life, that I was endlessly putting out fires and that my work hours were more than I wanted. They were required by the job. I did try to rearrange the job descriptions so that I could have some more flexibility for myself, but I wasn't able to get to that place. And I also felt like I was often, the firefighter position where you're putting out fires rather than on mission, rather than fixing problems and making things better. We did make some things better, and I'm very proud of the things I was able to do, but way too much of my time was taken over with solving problems that I felt, or I'm taking over with tasks that popped on my desk. I was supposed to spend my day trying to figure out policy, and instead I was dealing with immediate needs and not thought work. And so a combination of things, both as to work and as to personal life. I wanted to have more control over both my time working and my time off, and also the kind of work that I did. And I had a fabulous job, but I had to think really hard about moving. And I guess as to tips for your listeners, one of the tips I would want to give is it can be very hard to leave that job that looks really fabulous to you and to others. It's hard to explain to ourselves, never mind other people. Why would I walk away from this job? This is the job people get in and they stay for the rest of their lives. And so I think finding a way to work through that question, whether it's with a therapist or a spouse, a work group, a group of like-minded friends, whether you meditate, right? Finding a way to understand that that there's an emotional component and a psychological component so that you don't regret the move later, to move deliberatively through the process, thoughtfully, carefully, making vision boards or pros and cons lists, but taking the time to work through the process so you understand not just what you're leaving, but what are the options for what you're going to, and understand emotionally, lots of people will give you pushback. And a remarkable number of people will say, why are you doing this? Wait, you left this job with this money and this prestige, and isn't this what you worked for? And so understanding really well, working through it the way that is appropriate to work through it and to give it some time. I don't recommend the take this job and shove it approach, not in anger one day, but through very careful thought and deliberation. And then I'm going to say from a negotiating standpoint, if you're in a job and it's not working for you and you're visioning what you might want to do next, to me, the first stop is to your current employer, to say to the current employer, this is how I feel, this is what I'm interested in. Can you structure work for me that will make this, that will be useful? In other words, if your issue is you simply want to spend half the year cycling and the other half working as a chemical engineer, probably your employer is going to say no. But if you're planning on doing that anyway, say to your employer, I understand this is not typical, but this is what I'd like. Can we work it out? And, you're in your best position to negotiate. When you're ready to walk away, truly, then why not raise that question to suggest how it could work, right? I would love to do this, but I had a colleague once who took a cooking class in France and wanted a long-term cooking class and wanted to work at night and so on. Before COVID, before everybody Zoomed from everywhere, said, look, I want to be able to do this. Can you accommodate me? And so there is a value of asking where you are, but I am going to say as a tip to your listeners, understand that it's a big emotional move and approaching it with thoughtful deliberation and your emotions. Your emotions are real. Your feeling about it is real. If you're uncomfortable and you think there's something to address, there probably is, right? But that doesn't mean that how to handle it is purely emotional. And use your resources. Therapist, religious counselor, parents, friends, siblings, colleagues, whoever. Figure it out and work it through as a process. Think about it so that if you have a hard time 2 or 3 or 6 or months in or a year in or whatever, go, oh, but I made this decision thoughtfully, carefully, reasonably.
Debra, that's so good. That's so good. I'm just going to,
Okay.
what I wrote from what you said is move deliberately, thoughtfully, carefully, acknowledge your emotions, make use of your support, whatever tools you have like meditation and such. And this one, I think my listeners would really appreciate this. The best position to negotiate is when you're ready to walk away. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I am thinking of the listener who was so like exactly what you're saying. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they were passionate about the job, but they keep being firefighters instead of doing like the thought work. Right. But then maybe they feel a little stuck though. Like the thought that you were just saying, but I've worked so hard to be here. This is my dream job. Imagine a listener like that. And it sounds like the thing to do, like you said, is first stop, speak to manager. What would you say to a listener who is exactly in that position, feeling that way?
Right. So I'd say the first step is to have an actual real life alternative. We call it in negotiations a BATNA, a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So BATNA is the language. And what that means is, so for example, if you're negotiating over salary with your job, if you have another offer from another place for a higher salary and a better job, that's why, people say, well, I had a headhunter. I don't call them, but a headhunter called me and told me I could have a job at such and such organization with such and such salary. And you bring that into your employer to get a better offer. If it's a real job that you would go to. Sometimes if you say that to your boss, they say, I hear that and that's really great. And if you want to leave, you can leave. And so this is not a bluff. We don't do it if we're bluffing, but we do it when we've really thought about what we want to do. And if we're leaving for another job, or if we have already saved our money and have our nest egg and are ready economically to move. And we have a plan for what we will do if we simply turn that key and leave. When you're ready for that, when you really are truly ready to leave and have another alternative so that if your boss says, that's all very interesting, it's been nice knowing you, that you are happy. It isn't a bluff. You really, right, we're ready to leave. But you go to your boss and you say, look, I really love working at this organization. And I really love to work here. I'm planning on this other alternative, but I want to give you a shot to try to work this out, that I can work with still at my organization, but here are the things that I need. And then to be very clear what that is, clear about what it is and clear about where the flex points are and aren't, right? I'd like to work fewer hours overall. I've been working 70 hours a week. Here's my records that show that this is what I'm working. I would be I'm happy to continue working, but I want to be able to do that really not, between 40 and 50 a week, right? Or some weeks might be 70, but I want an average over the course of the full year where I'm fine to work during tax season or whatever, we're extremely busy. But when we're not busy, I want to be able to work from Portugal, right? Whatever it is that could work for you, to talk about what those options would be, and always to think ahead about what it is that the other party would want. When you think about, they're just going to say, well, what is the hesitation and concern that they have, right? So if the concern is, well, yes, we could say yes to that, but what about the week that we're in convention? We need you there. Okay, I can tell you ahead. I know convention is always an issue. I can tell you that even though I want to work this or that or be from Portugal, I'll come back from Portugal, right? To anticipate when you hear the no from your employer in your head, don't stop at the no. Go to the why are they concerned and what are the things that I might be able to offer that I can get what I want and solve the problems that my manager is going to be concerned about. Yes, that could work, but what about this client too? Whatever you hear, think about how you can get what you want and they can get what they want, even if that means sometimes we do it this way, sometimes we do it that way, right? On 30 weeks out of the year, we'll do it this way, but the other 22, we'll do it the other way. So thinking about what your boss will be concerned about and then coming up with some solutions and being open enough to say, look, I see these as your issues. And also to say, when they're saying no, I hear you, but tell me why where there's a no. And also be ready that, you may be leaving and you may really be leaving, but take your swing at it. It's a great moment to negotiate when you're really ready to leave. And a lot of people have an emotional problem with that. They're like, I just spent all this energy getting emotionally ready to leave. And now I'm going to go have a conversation with my boss. The answer is yeah. Because if you can get what you want without taking the risks of going out on your own, if you really can get what you want, give it a shot. Or even plan, look, let's give it a shot. If your management says yes, you also want to put a limit on it. You want to say to yourself, I'm trying this for a year. That's what they're saying to themselves as well. They're only trying it out to see if it works. Even if they say yes, they're just trying it out. And you could try it out and say, we thought it was going to work, but it didn't really. And then be ready at the end of the 3 months, 6 months, year of the, of the tryout period. But I do think it's a great moment to negotiate. Yes. And I help people do those negotiations. I've helped many people do those negotiations. Sometimes even just as a segue, that it's not even meant to be a permanent job, but that they're working on an important project. I don't want to leave now because we're in a 5-year project and, right, I want to be able to stay with it until it's done. Well, you could make an arrangement where you change from a full-time employee status to a consultant status that allows you, that could almost be perfect, right? Where if you're trying to build a new business, that you work for your previous employer, first 70% time, then 60, then 50, then 40, and that decline from your current employer allows you to build a new practice or a new idea of your own. So it doesn't have to be a sharp break. Mm-hmm. It might be, but it doesn't have to be.
I love that.
Better chance often with a small and medium-sized corporation, right, or business. Big corporations sometimes are like, oh, we'll just get another one to replace you. But there's opportunities to do it, and I've seen people negotiate for a different work life, either in the long term or for a temporary period. Temporary sometimes in years.
Debra, I honestly...
What else?
You know what's crazy? I feel like I could end the episode here, but I won't because I still want to ask at least one more question.
Okay.
That was so helpful. And I wish I'd known you like when did I like 3 years ago, because I probably would have shortened the time. What I'm hearing is be clear, be prepared, and be ready if you need to leave. What I love that I didn't even think of is the mind shift of like a tryout period. You may not say that, to the manager, but like that didn't
Right.
even occur to me. And I'm sure this has been true for like clients you've worked with, but at least for me, sometimes I get into that mindset of all or nothing, thinking that if I decide to stay with this company, that means whatever other alternative I was thinking is forever gone. And I just love that you said, no, it could be a tryout period. So
Right.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's so good. I want to shift over because aside from like the negotiation stuff, like the part that we were talking about before, listeners, I'm
Right.
telling you, Debra has a lot to say. I'll give resources on how to contact her in the show notes. Don't worry. Everyone's like, stop talking, Laura, let her talk. I would love to hear more about, because you mentioned you started off like in broadcasting and then you were a lawyer and then you became the negotiation whisperer. What was that shift like for you? Talk us through what that was like.
Right. So I'll talk about that. So the shift. So I made my decision when I was was the national director of news and broadcast for AFTRA. I made my decision that I wanted to move. I did have the conversation where I was, and what it led to is a very long notice period because I was involved in some very time sensitive matters, and I didn't want to leave AFTRA and the people I had worked with in the lurch. And so I think from the time that we decided that I wasn't going to stay, it was more than 6 months where I was finishing up work. And so for me, that was emotionally, I was able to begin thinking about what I wanted to do next. We did something quite valuable, and this is, I would say, maybe a tip to your listeners as well. We created some economic stability in my house. My husband's still married to him. Our daughter, who's now 26, was at the time, let's see, 10 years old, actually. And so my income was relevant in our family. And so we decided we were going to refinance our house anyway. We took a year of my W-2 out of the house, and we decided that I would have a year sabbatical. My husband is a professor. So we decided I had never had a sabbatical. We were going to create a family sabbatical for me to be able to economically do this. We could have done it other ways. We had, whether people save money. I've known people who've moved back in with their family, or they've moved into different living arrangements to save money, to have the economic base to be able to try out something new. But we created an economic environment, and I thought I was debating how I wanted to work. I thought I was going to do a lot more work on advising on contracts. It took a long time for that part of my practice to build. And at the beginning, I did a lot of project work. So I've been doing project work now for 15 years, project work or work for individual clients now for 15 years. At the beginning, I found pieces of work that gave me some stability. So, for example, there was a union that was reorganizing itself, and I worked with them 2 days a week for about 18 months. That was perfect for me. I had 2 days of steady income, right? And then I also started teaching a class at Rutgers. That was my first place I wanted to teach. I taught at Rutgers. Then I started teaching with Cornell. But essentially, little by little, I built my practice from lots of different pieces. And so it was not all at once. The part about having that initial kind of 2 days a week steady work that I could rely on for 18 months was very useful. And when I was done with that, I had another kind of term project that I assisted another organization. I made a website, and I started literally just telling people what I did. And anybody who works knows in a consulting capacity, one of the big ways work comes is you do work and you get more work. You're out there in front of people, you present. Teaching is very useful for this. Teaching often doesn't pay enough on its own, although I've done relatively well that way, but puts you in front of audiences that can then hire you to do other things. and also following the work. So the negotiation whisperer, I didn't say when I left my television radio artist job, oh, I'll be a negotiation whisperer. I said, I want to do meaningful work. I want to be able to use my negotiation skills, my teaching skills in a way that is valuable for me and for the world, I hope, for other people. And I did expect to be in rooms with my face showing, but I never expected that I'd be whispering to people in the negotiation context. And yet that's a valuable part. And some things I do are very public. I was just helping to facilitate negotiations at Kaiser Permanente, a very public. I was in front of giant conference rooms of people helping to facilitate negotiations. So I'm perfectly happy to have my face shown, but I think sometimes the work finds us. Like I was working with a friend of mine and a colleague on sexual harassment training, because people always need training on sexual harassment, and it's a thing that I can always do. And the person I was working with was an internal investigator. And during the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, she said to me, I was talking to her about, well, what class should we do? And she said, actually, I want you to be an investigator. And I said, I'm not really. Let's talk about that. And I was somewhat hesitant, but it was great and interesting work and feed some of my other work. And I can give value and get value. So sometimes the things we think are going to be our economic mainstay aren't always what we expect. But if it works, if somebody else says to you, I think you could do this, I'd like you to do this, try to believe them. Try to say yes, right? But I've seen people say, oh no, I don't do that. You're like, if this person thinks I can, let's talk about. Be honest to say, look, I haven't done an investigation since X years ago. I haven't done it. I can. How can we study up? How can I make sure that I'll be able to give you good value? Right? But say yes. Somebody comes and offers you work for pay. They're willing to pay you for work. They must see something about you. Try to say yes. Think about saying yes. But I have done a lot of different parts. I do negotiations. I do them publicly and privately. I do facilitation publicly and privately. I advise individuals publicly and privately, right? And I do a lot of teaching in different contexts, and some of it in labor and employment, and some of it in pure business. My Marcus Evans work, pure business negotiations. Because I got a contact from somebody who said, can you teach this? I said, well, I haven't taught the Uniform Commercial Code, ever, but 90% of what you're asking I can teach, and I can learn what I need to about the Uniform Commercial Code. So yes, let's do that. And then you do that work. And then more work comes because you did that work and somebody else sees you and then they invite you. I'm not sure I fully understand the magic of it, but my husband and I sat down and made a boogie, how much I have to get. Boogie or bogey? Maybe it's a bogey. A amount of money I'm supposed to make every year to keep up my side of the bargain in our relationship. And I made it every year, including COVID, kind of amazingly.
Oh my gosh. Amazing.
So that's okay. But not always from the sources I expect, but that's okay. It meets my goals. My goals when I left was more control over my life and interesting work to do. And I spend like more than 6 weeks a year on vacation, sometimes 8 or 10 weeks on vacation a year. I have a lot of vacation time because I make it for myself. And then the other time, I do really good and interesting work. So does that answer your question? Maybe not enough background.
Oh, no. Are you kidding? I'm smiling. So did you see me taking all these notes?
Okay. That was a lot.
No, that was so good. Okay. I'm going to tell you the things that you are amazing. I'm so glad that we connected, seriously. So the first thing that I wrote down is that you had an economic plan. Because a lot of the times when I have my own clients or even friends who talk to me and they want to switch, they want to quit corporate or they want to whatever, even if they want to stay in corporate. And the concern is always the money. I can't leave, I'm stuck. But what I love is you're like, well, then create an economic plan, whatever that looks like. And then you gave an example of what that could look like. And then what I really loved is you said you had 2 goals, more control of life, interesting work to do. You did not say, my goal is to become a negotiation whisperer. You weren't attached to a specific, this is what I teach. You weren't attached to a specific how. And then you said, be open to what it could look like. And the thing that like really in our conversation that wasn't recorded here, but I'm glad it came up again, when you said if somebody offers you something because they see not offers but like asks you to do some sort of work, I love that you said, really, let's talk about it. You said try to say yes. How can I say yes? Right? So when you said that to me, I'm like, oh, that's so good. And Debra, like that happened. I like somebody was like, I'd like to work with you, but like the package you're telling me isn't exactly it. And at first I'm like, oh, I don't know. But then I thought about it and we had our conversation. And then I was like, what am I doing saying no to money? So then I went back and said, you know what? Like I'm gonna make a special offer because, like I can tell that you really want to work with me. And here so then I proposed something that was not in my plan. So I love everything that you said. And then you said you work and then you get more work. So for my listeners who maybe relate to me, who are sometimes like, I want to do the quote unquote right thing and get into analysis paralysis, it's like, no, get out there and do something because it's going to lead to the other thing.
Right. And the something leads to the other thing. And the saying yes, I do remind another one. I had somebody early on when I was on my own. I was teaching negotiations and somebody said, oh, can you teach mediation? And I immediately, it's connected. It's one step over. Maybe for people who aren't in negotiations, it's all the same, but it's one step from what I was doing. And I said, yeah, I think I can do that. Let me think about that and get back to you tomorrow. And I quick got on the phone and called a friend of mine who's a mediator and said, would you like to co-teach this class with me? And then I co-teach the class. I say, I come back. Yes, we'll do that. I'm getting paid a little bit less because now I can only, they offered me a certain amount. And so we're all that economics about how that works out, but okay, make a little bit less money, but I'm going to teach the class. And then I learn things because I co-teach. And now one of the parts of my practice is to be a mediator and facilitator, partially because I've taught a class in mediation, partially because I said yes, because we got there. I'm also going to say sometimes the economic base is something else. I had my cohort, when I first was trying to figure out how to move from being a salaried employee to making my own money, I had a lot of conversations with largely women, because I did feel like that men learn a lot from men as well, but also I had a particular cohort of women because I think that sometimes we see things in a more open way. But I had one friend who literally was a summer wedding photographer, and that was the base of money that she had while she was trying to become an arbitrator. And she was never credited. She didn't put out, she wasn't on a website, but she had been a wedding photographer. And in the summertime, they need lots of wedding photographers. So she would do it and it would make her X $1,000s a year. It had nothing to do with her career goals, but it was a guaranteed amount of money. And she did it for a long time until her cash flow from the work of her heart came across, right? And there's no shame in doing that. Or another friend and colleague who was the bookkeeper for a small New Jersey town. It pays X thousand a year. It takes a certain amount of time. It's a guaranteed amount of money. And while you're trying to build the career of your dreams, the job of your dreams, the consulting firm of your dreams, it's okay to do these things. It doesn't all have to be on point towards your goal. Some of it is helping you emotionally deal with the question of, how is my rent or mortgage going to be paid? And that's legitimate. And you can do that and nobody has to know. You can either put it on your resume or not, that you are a wedding photographer or are the town bookkeeper for the town of X, New Jersey. And that's okay. But over time, you do want to get in the spaces where people hire for the work that you do, so that over time, people will hire you for the work that you want to do, that feeds your soul, that makes your heart happy, and also allows you to have SEP contributions to your own retirement, which you hope one day to still be able to do, right? Because you want to have your life, you want your current economics to work, and eventually you'll start needing to save again for your own retirement. Maybe not in the first year or two that you're out on your own, unless you're really great, but yeah, you need to be able to do that.
Debra, this has been so good. And I honestly can probably talk to you for another hour. No, I'm like,
Sure.
sincerely.
Your listeners are like enough already.
No. They're like, I want to talk to Debra. So for those who are just like, oh my God, I really need
Uh-huh.
someone to help me negotiate, like whatever it is, or who just want to get in contact with you, how can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Okay. So the best bet, I think LinkedIn is a great place. If they're on LinkedIn, I am there. I'm also fine to get an email. If you send me an email to Debra Osofsky at gmail.com, shall I spell that, or do you have it in your notes so that people
I'll
can
put it in
grab
the
it?
show notes.
You'll put it in the
Yep.
notes. Okay. So, and that's fine. People can get in touch with me. And I also will say this, if people are interested in negotiation assistance, obviously, right, I have fees that I charge, but my first initial conversation is always free so that I can learn what people need. And also, I endeavor, if I cannot help someone, to see if I can send them to someone else. It's one of my theories in the world, which is I think that the world of negotiations can be intimidating and confusing to people. The words of, law can be intimidating and confusing. And if it's not my area, I often can help people figure out how to find the right person to help them. So I'm open to being contacted by whoever your listeners are, because you are glorious.
Thank you.
And the service that you're providing, I think this idea of that pivot moment that I'm very taken. I mean, this is why I'm talking to you, is that I really wish that when I had been at my moment where I was trying to sort through this question, I was not aware of anybody like you who could help to advise and, manage the process, think about the process. And so I did, in fact, tried to talk to career counselors who really wanted to send me back to a paid career with someone else. Like, let me find you a job in a corporation or a labor union or a not-for-profit. And I was like, no, that's not what I want. And I didn't want a battery of tests. I wanted someone who wanted to help me do the thing that I already was pretty clear that I wanted to do, help me kind of double check it. And so you seem to be in the niche that I really wish I had been able to meet you 17 years ago, but I get to meet you now.
Yes.
So that's great.
Yes. Thank you so much, Debra. And I have one last question that I ask all my guests.
Sure.
If
Okay.
you were, this is a fun question. If you are an item in a coffee shop, so you could be a drink or a pastry or whatever it may be, what would you be and why?
So I love Earl Grey tea. They do a London fog, which is kind of, a high tone version of that. But Earl Grey tea with milk. I love Earl Grey tea for the flavor of it, the scent of it. And I'm also really taken when I learned the backstory of Earl Grey tea, or of bergamot, which is the flavor in Earl Grey tea. And that is, bergamot is a flavor that comes from the rind of a bergamot orange. A bergamot orange you cannot eat. It is too bitter to eat a bergamot orange. But there's essential oils in the rind, and that essential oil is the scent of Earl Grey tea. And I love that somebody figured out that you can't eat the fruit, but that the oil in the rind is going to make this glorious scented tea. So I think that it doubles my pleasure in that this is an item that you kind of, how did it come to exist? And I kind of love it. But the scent of Earl Grey tea, and a really good Earl Grey tea with lots of milk and sugar. Yay. I love that.
I love that. And I didn't know the story, first of all, behind the scent. And I love that it kind of is like a great analogy for what you were saying about being open and like say, find a way to say yes. It's a great analogy. So I think that's a perfectly fitting item. You didn't even intend for that, but like that's what I'm seeing in that.
Oh, yes. Well, right. Somebody else said yes, or somebody else was thinking outside of the box. But I think the saying yes is really important. I think that particularly when we have areas of expertise, if someone is an engineer or a lawyer, if they have a specific profession, a doctor, they have been taught that there are boundaries and that we should say yes to this and then no to the things outside of there. And those categories can be very useful to find the expertise that you want. And, I want to go see a doctor who has a lot of expertise
Right.
if I need to see that doctor, or a lawyer or an engineer, right? If I want to build my building safe. But when we're thinking of our own lives and how we want to live our lives and the work that we want to do, we don't have to be so tight in on those categories. We're allowed to be on the edges or adjacent, or maybe even a couple of steps over from before, and those opportunities, and and I think really to believe people when they say, I'd like you to teach it, because I'd like you to teach this class, I'd like you to do this negotiation. Sometimes we think, why me? And instead to think, this person sees in me a person who can do this job. So let me find a way, if I can, to do it. If it really is, somebody wants me to argue a divorce case, I'm not doing that because I don't have the expertise, and I'll be happy to refer them elsewhere. But if it can work, yeah, say yes. Find a way to say yes. I think that's, and yes, if my drink choice is doubles up on the idea that I'm a say yes person. But yes, you should. I'm going to say, I don't know if you want it, it's in or out of your podcast, but there is a podcast called Gastropod that's all about food, and I learned a bunch about this from Gastropod. It's two women who talk about food science, food history, and if you like food like I do, it's another podcast. I learned it there, and pretty fun. So anyway. Anything? I don't think it was your last question. So I really am so
thank you.
Delighted that you invited me. So thank you for having me and asking such good questions.
Thank you so much, Debra.
Okay. All right. Take care now.
All right. Big thanks again to Debra Osofsky for sharing their story so openly. These conversations are such a reminder that no pivot is too messy, too late, or too unconventional. If something she said resonated, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with someone you know who needs it. And when you're ready to start your own pivot, head to www.leadintact.com for free resources or book a free 20-minute call with me. I'm here for you.